Thank you so much for coming. We're back in
Thank you
the
for inviting
office like
me.
we never left. We're doing today Mercy Corners podcast, and I have my dear friend here that we met in a very funny way.
That's right.
But we're gonna talk about that later. So tell me about you, born and raised in Cuba.
Yeah, so I was just telling you, I was born in Cuba. I left when I was 8 years old. My father left Cuba when I was five, and my mom and I stayed behind. And he lived in Madrid, Spain, uh, working in the streets, surviving, you know, until he was able to get a asylum visa to come to the U.S. And then as soon as he came, he always stayed in contact with my mom and with me. But as soon as he came, he wanted to reunite my mother and I, so that we could grow up, as a family.
Right.
So he settled in St. Pete, Florida, and short, Lord and behold, my mom and him came to the conclusion, hey, like the best way for us to come together quickly is for us to leave Cuba the fastest way possible. And this is 2003, so a very different world, 20 years ago, 21 years ago. So there was the reunification process that could take like 15, 20 years through the not even U.S. embassy in Havana. It was the U.S. interest section in Havana. So my mother and my father wanted me to grow up, with a family, like in a family unit. So they said, well, we're gonna get you out of Cuba. So they decided, my mom and I were gonna leave on a boat. My father, he got $20,000 from a guy who would lend in the streets, and paid 10,000 for my mom and 10,000 for me to the people who did human smuggling to get people out of Cuba.
So you came by yourself with your mom
With my mother,
in the
yeah,
boat.
and 43 other people.
Oh wow.
Yeah, including a 7 month pregnant woman.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and it was a treacherous journey. We almost died. The boat broke in the middle of the Gulf. We went from Cuba to Mexico,
Oh
and
wow.
then from Mexico we crossed into the United States. It was, it was quite traumatic, and I still, I remember when like my mom was so sick on the boat ride, when the boat broke, that like her skin would stick together, like of how dehydrated she was. And my mom was like the biggest thing in my life, still is, right?
Yeah.
Like you met her, and uh, I always would tell myself in that boat ride, I would, if my mom was gonna die, I wanted to die before my mom died because I didn't want to be alone. I didn't know anybody. So that experience um, shaped my entire life until.
And you were 8 years old, so you remember that like it was yesterday.
Yeah, yeah. Unless memory erases, I will never forget that. And then my parents, told me, "Hey, you came here to learn and to be free," and that's what I did. I'm a product of public education.
You are.
I went to public school in America in St. Pete until I went to FIU here in our very own Miami, and it's to be free and to learn. Every day I'm learning, but every day I'm free. And that kept and stood with me forever and ever. I went back to Cuba to see my family here and there as much as I could until I got more and more politically active here in the States. When the last time I went to Cuba was like 2017, 2016, before my grandfather passed. And I can't go back to Cuba anymore because of all the stuff that we do with Cuban Freedom Bars. And when July 11th happened, it kind of got this bug into me that like the Cuban people still want that freedom.
Do you believe that? Do they want that freedom?
Yeah, I do. I do believe it. I do think that their sense of wanting freedom is very different than what we understand it to be because they haven't had it for 70, almost 70 years. So we wake up every day and we understand our rights and our democratic system very different than someone who is trying to like think of what is my kid going to eat tonight, and how are they going to dress tomorrow. So I always put it into perspective that our vision of what freedom is, which is what most people should have, because we have the time, and thank God, the means to have the freedom to think of what what freedom is and what it should be, and the rights that we should have and the rights that we need to have and guard. Those aren't necessarily the same that we can expect for a country where people have lived without any democracy and have lived under totalitarianism for over 6 decades, right? But in them, you see that they want to be free, because freedom is something that's born with us as humans. I believe that God gives us the idea of freedom, and as much as that dictatorship and any totalitarian dictatorship or any system that's dictatorial tries to take that natural thing from you, they can't.
Right.
It's innately within you as a human being. So that's when young people went out to the streets July 11th by the thousands. What we were witnessing was those kids never lived in freedom.
Right.
They were dreaming of freedom.
Okay.
And why is that? It's innately a part of who we are as humans. We want to be free. We want to progress, to have better things in our lives. And what's holding our people, and I say our people in terms of the Cuban people,
right?
Because our people here in America, we are our people too. I feel more gratitude to this country than any in the world. But that is what they wanted, and that's what they want. And that fear has chipped away a little bit, but you still have a very brutal dictatorship. They have the monopoly of violence in their hands, right? And people fear that because they know that that comes with consequences.
Right. Do you remember the day that your mom and your dad sat with you and told you we're leaving?
No, actually, because my father left and he didn't tell us anything. Because in Cuba you live in this society where you can't trust anybody. Your neighbor could work for La Seguridad del Estado, for state security. In your own house, when you're gonna cook like meat, like carne de res, like beef, which is outlawed by Cuban law, like you could go to jail for longer for killing a cow than killing a human, which is incredibly crazy. But this is the system where Cubans are born into and live into. People in their house, between your grandmother and your mother, oye, estamos cocinando carne de res. We're cooking cow, like beef. And you're like, when you retroactively think back, as an adult now, as someone that's, I'm like, why was my grandmother in her own house, in her living room, whispering? It's the innate fear that is born and instilled in us as everyday people in this society that makes you think that every second of every moment someone's watching you. So my father didn't tell us. We learned about it when it was kind of, and then I was chained in school, because my father left the country and all these things, and but my mother was and is I think like the strongest person.
She really is.
That I know.
I know.
She has a backbone
of.
She has a backbone of. I don't know.
She is a special person.
Yeah, and I'm her only child, and my parents try to have other children, and my mom had many miscarriages. She couldn't have more kids. So I think that's something, she wanted me to have a better future. So when my father came to the U.S. after 2 years in Spain, they discussed over letters, not over the phone, because this is, again, over letters what to do, and they came to the conclusion of, and then my mother did tell me, she said, this is what we're going to do, but we're not going to tell your grandmother. We're going to tell your grandmother that we're going on a plane to Costa Rica, where one of my aunts lived in at the time. And it was a believable story for my grandmother not to be afraid that we were leaving the country on a boat, because she was going to probably have a meltdown. So what she did after we told her about it was already, it already had happened. So the good thing is that, I trusted and loved my mother so much, and obviously still do, but she was the most trusted figure in my life at that little age that I had, because my dad had left early, and my dad loves me dearly and is phenomenal. But my mother was my mother and my father during those 3 years of my life, you know, and it was tough years because she was the bread maker for me and for my grandmother who was had asthma, and my grandfather, may he rest in peace, he dealt with alcoholism most of his life. So it was really my mother who had to take care of all of us during that period of my life.
Wow.
And she did. She didn't only take care of us, but she excelled at taking care of us. So I learned about it, and then we left Villa Clara, where I was born in Central Cuba, and we went to Havana, and we were waiting, for this call from a guy who was like a courier who was gonna tell us, you're going to the Havana Zoo, and there's gonna be this bus waiting for you, and it was like a code word for like the bus and all these things. We were hiding in Havana for almost like 3 months, like in a friend of my father's house. Well, like people back in Villa Clara were like, where's your grandson? Telling and my grandmother was like, well, my grandson is not even here, and like nothing would add up because they obviously knew that we had not left the country, because they could see the official records. While my grandmother was like, they're in Costa Rica. So it was a interesting thing. But during that period, funny enough, I got to learn about all of Havana. In the periods where we were like waiting for the meeting place to go to the vote and all that stuff, we went like I don't know how many times, and the bus that was to the last time. My mother and some of the neighbors would take us around. Obviously, we wouldn't tell anybody why we were there. We told them that I was getting some medical attention that I couldn't get like in the provinces. So like again, you couldn't trust really anybody other than like the small tiny circle of people. But when I came to the U.S., it was like eye opening because I had been in school in Cuba, and in Cuba, you're in this process of indoctrination since you're a little kid. So I was 8 years old, but I already had like this process had already begun with me since I was in pre-kindergarten, right? And like you would hear on the news, you would hear at school, you would hear it from your teacher, you would hear it that America was like a bad place.
Yeah, you already kind of like brainwashed.
Yeah, all of our problems were because of America. Like if there was a blackout, it was because of America. If there was this, it was because of America. If it was all because of America. Funny enough, I was in Cuba during the Alian Gonzalez
saga. I remember.
And
I remember those times.
When I became an advocate, the first time I met Ileana Rosletny, I told her, I wrote a letter to you when I was 5 years old.
Oh.
And she was like, what are you talking about? She looked at me and she was like, this kid's crazy. And I was like, no, I wrote a letter to you from Cuba. And she was like, more dumbfounded. And I was like, because when Elian was here, I was in first grade. And Fidel Castro decided that every Cuban child in school had to write a letter to La Loa Feroz. That's how they would describe Ileana Rosletny on Cuban state television. That she was keeping Elian from us, from the Cuban people, from his father. And that was my first ever, kind of like
a hate?
Yeah. And God knows what I wrote in the letter because I really don't remember.
Oh my gosh.
But what I do remember was that it was a requirement that we had to write the letter. And they were sending these letters, I think, to her office in Washington by the hundreds and the thousands from Cuban children across Cuba. And I was one of those kids that was.
That's so sad. So young guys writing hate letters to her, thinking she's doing something really bad, right?
Yeah. And imagine like being born into that, and then I came to America,
Did you come to America with hate, or did you?
I didn't come to America with hate. I came to America with fear. Because they would tell us, in America, they kidnap kids. Mm-hmm. In America, you can't go play outside. And when I came, I was fearful. I would not want to leave my apartment. I would not want to go outside. Like, I genuinely believed, because that's all that I had known, although my mother would tell me, hey, that's not true. Mm-hmm. But imagine if all your authority figures in school and in society, with the exception of your parents, are telling you this every day since you're a child, when you're absorbing the most information in your life, that makes you question so many things later on. And you have to grow out of that. And of course, I grew out of it because I went to school and saw, like, wow, in America they have chocolate milk at school. I'd never seen that in school in Cuba. You know, and it was the little things that we take for granted that opened my eyes to the greatness of this country. Like, there were no blackouts in the middle of the day. There was air conditioning in my school, let alone my home. Right. You know, so these little things opened my eyes to, hey, like, and this is me as an 8-year-old, right? Like, reflecting back, and then I became, you know, a student of history. I became a lover of this country even more, of its founding, of its constitutional system, and of the dream of one day where I was born, hopefully kids having opportunities, having the rights to have rights. And that stuck with me. It sticks with me until, obviously, till today.
And then you opened your...
And then, yeah, so funny enough, when the July 11th protest started, there was what I loved the most was this unity in our community, in our Cuban American diaspora. And people were like, we're exiles, we're not the diaspora. And I'm like, yes, we are exiles, but you are the diaspora because you weren't born in Cuba, but you feel just as Cuban. You know, you feel a connection to this cause. And I always describe ourselves as a diaspora, which includes us exiles, like myself, who left directly, and your parents directly, but it includes the children of those exiles, the grandchildren of those exiles, right? And we care. So I always like to throw the entire umbrella, right? It's a lot of us. And that unity that we saw through July 11th was what brought the idea of Cuban Freedom March. You know, Alex, Otaola, all of the other Cuban influencers, musicians, they were telling people, let's go to Washington, D.C. And I was like, phenomenal. Like, look at how many people are reacting to this. Like, without Alex, without the unity that we saw in those moments, none of that could have been achieved, right?
I heard about your foundation, but I didn't know it was you.
Yeah.
So everybody thought it was Alex Otaola, the
march. So I always say that the march couldn't have happened without Alex, okay? And sometimes I think he thinks that I don't give him credit for it, and in all clarity, I do. Like, I give him credit for the unity of bringing people together like no one else has or can. He has this phenomenal power, right? And I love that. I love that about him, and I love what he does with it, because he could do just a show and be successful, right? But he does
bring awareness,
right, where others don't,
right?
So I respect that. What I always said was, we're going and we're heeding the call from Alex and all the other influencers and the artists, but we're going to DC and we're standing in one place. You know what's happening in Cuba. The people that come to the rally know what's happening in Cuba. The rest of the world doesn't know what's happening in Cuba. That's where the idea of the march came about.
And you've been around the world with your foundation.
Yeah. So the idea of the march was for our information and for what we know is happening in Cuba to not stay in front of the White House with us who are passionate about this issue. It was for all of Washington, D.C. to visualize the largest concentration of Cuban Americans in history, to see them march through the main street of Washington, to see us go and protest in front of the regime embassy and to say, wow, why are all these people walking through the middle of DC, and ask themselves a question and then say, oh, it's because something is happening there. So that's where the march came about. It was to visualize, to bring more awareness.
Were you surprised that so many people showed up?
Honestly, yes. We were super surprised because we did a lot of media, we did a lot of stuff, but it was really just a group of friends, of my friends who went to FIU with me.
That they support everything that you do.
Yes, you see.
Yes.
And for people who are against fraternities and sororities and stuff like that, the support that I found in fraternity and sorority life. I'm part of a fraternity, but I also have friends who are women who are part of sororities at FIU. The support was really phenomenal, and you see that. But I really think that everybody was surprised. We were all surprised. We thought it was going to be 6 of us holding a banner, walking down the street because we asked for the permits for the march.
How many people showed up?
I think it was about 10,000 people.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a lot. And again, all of it, this was not about me or Cuban Freedom March. It was the power of togetherness, right? Like,
to come together.
The convocation that Alex did, to ask people, go to Washington, that everybody else, every other influencer, whether it was Los Peachy Boys, whether it was Omani Garcia, whether it was whoever it was, at that point, on those days, everybody said, go. We have to be together.
Yeah.
And the power of togetherness in this fight is the biggest thing that we have that the regime has tried to stifle from us. And I always say that they have tried to divide and conquer us. When we are together, we can have political differences, we can have whatever differences in the world. But if our common enemy is the dictatorship, we can come together on this and work together on it, right?
Correct.
So that power of togetherness is what the regime fears the most.
The most, yes.
And we have to continue to slap them in the face and say, we're together because we believe that you guys are the enemy of our people, which they are.
Yeah.
So
we met.
Yes.
We met back in.
Put your hair a little bit forward because it is wrong.
Oh.
No, put your hair.
Oh, front.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right there.
Right. So we met.
The person who did win is also a great person. I called him right away. Omar Blanco, he's someone who's worked for this community for a long time, a firefighter, a great man. And I called him right away. I congratulated him. I told him, your success is the success of our community. And I support him fully. He's a Republican. I support him with all my heart, and he's doing a phenomenal job. He's my representative now. So yes. But the process of being so young, with my story, right, coming from nothing to being able to run for state office. It's an American story. It's a story of how great this country is, of what I dream should be something that we would want to see, in Cuba and we want to preserve here in America, right? The idea and the ability that a guy came here, couldn't speak a word of English, who had no education, whose family was dirt poor, can come here, go to school, be a product of public education, learn, live, thrive, and run for office.
Will you be running again?
I don't know if I will be running again, but what I do know is that my life is always and will always be devoted to service. I'm entrepreneurial. I have a lot of other things that I do.
I know, right? I see you running around Miami,
but
you're also a realtor.
I'm not a realtor. I'm the chief executive for the Miami Association of Realtors commercial board.
Wow.
So I don't sell anything, but what I do is I work with the top, best commercial realtors, I would say, in the world. And the Miami board, the association is by far the largest in the world. We have our global headquarters here in Miami, and we do so much. And we do something that I think is dear to my heart, which is wealth creation for people, right? If you buy a business or if you buy a home, that's the American dream, right? So it aligns very much with my belief that, you can create and do things in America that in other places you cannot do. So every day I do that work. I do Human Freedom March. I do whatever it is because I believe in the power of our individuality. We're free. In a free society, we can do endless things, whether we're in office, whether we're outside of office, whatever it is, but we can do endless good things.
I love it. But I do see you running. I do see something political in your future. You're young still. You have a long way to go. I think you're impacting the world, and I think you have a bright future. And I do see you as something else.
I appreciate that. I hope that whatever it is that I do in the future, I just want to make sure that it's something that I can positively impact people. That's always what I want to do. That's always what I care the most about. And it's not always that you have the opportunity to do that. It's just that we also have to find a way to connect what we do with helping others. And there's always really is a way. I'm a big believer in God. I really am. When the boat that I was riding in broke down, from that day till now, until I die, God has been a big presence of who I am, because I saw, there was this older lady, she was in her 80s in the boat, and she was like, hey guys, like pray whatever you believe in, because I think we're gonna die. And people prayed, and I didn't really have a notion of what praying was at that early age. I came from a country where going to church was not really a thing. It was an atheist society for the most part, although my mother and my grandmother always instilled in me the importance of God. And maybe it was coincidental, but I don't think it was. Like 2.5 hours later, one of the motors of the boat turned on, and we made it to Mexico. So from that, I always say, God guides your life. You leave everything in His hands, everything, and you don't question and you don't doubt. And whatever He throws your way, you have to find a way to make it be that He is putting this in your life for purpose. Like, if I have to clean floors tomorrow, I find pride and happiness in that, because that's God's plan.
Right.
And you come out of that and you learn that by cleaning that floor or by doing whatever you're doing in your life, there's some good outcome that you're doing for society. And if you look at it that way, there's no losing. There's no losing. There's always something good. So
thank you so much for coming. Thank you.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for your activism. You're a prime example of exactly what I was talking about.
Thank you.
Like, we can believe that we have the power, while being free, to do more than anyone can imagine. And if more people embrace that, wow, what a different place this world would be, right?
Yep.
So that really is what I believe deeply in, and we need more people like you.
Oh, and you, and like you too. Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, so